I am joined today by Jamie Drummond, who is PKF International's Director of Assurance. Jamie will be talking with me about PKF's new Audit Data Analytics document, the ADA framework. So Jamie, can you tell us what to expect from the ADA framework?
Thank you, AJ. So the ADA framework is a roughly about 60-page document, and it sets out a number of things for firms to think about when developing their own audit data analytics approach, either from scratch or perhaps they've started already but are not yet really using it to great effect on the audit. And there's some thoughts there on how to really get motoring with using ADAs more frequently.
Great, okay. And where are we as a network in using ADAs? Are we having much success so far?
Well, I think we've probably got a mixed sort of bag really in terms of what our firms are doing. We've got some firms who are very comfortable with using ADAs. They've invested in technology and people and are really starting to embed that as part of the audit approach. But I think the reality is that we do have a large number of firms who are right at the opposite end of the experience and they haven't started using ADAs at all as a formal part of how they would do an audit. So we've got this wide spectrum. I think that's been an important feature really when we develop the framework, because we're trying to provide a document that's helpful to firms whatever end of the spectrum that you're on. And you know, that point around are we having success so far, I think those firms that are using ADAs are increasingly finding that they're having success. And one area I think in particular that's interesting is that some of our firms that have used it successfully in audit are starting to get a lot of confidence in how they run ADA procedures and what value they can derive from using data analytics approaches. And we are seeing firms who are really branching out in more of an advisory capacity as well. So yes, there has been successes, and yes, we have seen some audits changing a little bit in terms of how they're run using ADAs. But if I were to think about this in terms of numbers, probably the majority of our firms that are in the network are not yet comfortable with using ADAs.
Okay. Is the framework aimed at anyone in particular? Is it partners or managers?
Well, I think both, and actually, you know, one of the points that we recognized when we writing just even the preface for the document was that we do have to make this appeal to all levels, and you know, some of our guidance might really be aimed at, or some of our guidance in other subjects might be aimed more towards one level of experience more so than others. But this really, for ADAs to work properly, absolutely needs buy-in, support, commitment from the most experienced members in the team. They are the people who will be signing the audit reports. They need to know that the ADA is compliant with auditing standards, auditing requirements. So they absolutely have to be comfortable that the specific use of ADAs where they sit within the audit is compliant with auditing requirements and provides appropriate audit evidence. The other reality is that it's although it's the partners and senior members of the team who will be reviewing the output of ADAs, realistically, it will be the more junior members of the team who may be asked to go off and run ADA routines. So they will be very much on the operational side of it in terms of how ADAs are specifically used and the interaction with clients in terms of accessing data and transforming it into something that's usable. So really, it does appeal, I think, to both partners, to managers, and to those junior members of the team in terms of those that will be running the routines. So I think it's a very practical document. It's quite hands-on in terms of talking through specifics, but we do recognise that we need to appeal across that range of experience in order to really get moving with more firms using the ADAs.
Yeah, okay. You touched on this, but is the framework relevant only to audit, or will it be of interest to other lines of service?
Yeah, so at the moment, the framework really is written from an audit perspective, and it recognises, well, it discusses what the position is with our standard setters in terms of whether there are any auditing standards and what they say about use of data analytics procedures. But again, I come back to it was intended to be a very practical document, and we do hope that others who may be outside of audit or maybe work in a dual capacity, a little bit of time in audit and a bit of time in advisory, they will understand this document. It will be of interest to them as well, but it is predominantly aimed for auditing teams. I think one thing I'd say is that regardless of how you're using the outputs from an ADA routine, a lot of the initial procedures and phases of running an ADA routine would be very similar, whether you're doing this for an audit or whether you're doing it for an advisory engagement. So by that I mean, regardless of what line of service you're in, you still have to go through the same challenges in terms of accessing data. You still go through the same challenges in terms of cleaning up the data that you're first provided with. You would still have those same challenges around transforming the data into something that you can work with to serve the purposes that you're using the ADA procedure in the first place. And the document talks around those. It talks about those phases of activity. So there is quite a lot of overlap anyway, naturally, in terms of just running an ADA routine, whether that data analytics is for an audit or for something else. So both in terms of this document, I think being relevant and practical for any line of service, I think it meets that objective. But it's also written in a pretty straightforward way. It's not too much bogged down in audit talk. So hopefully it would appeal to others from different lines of service that are considering making more use of data analytics procedures.
Great, thank you. In my role, I receive a lot of interest from external providers who are developing data analytics tools. Are our member firms working with a wide range of developers, or are they doing more in-house?
I think I'm probably not seeing a wide range of developers being used by by our firms. Maybe a couple of reasons for that. One is that as a network, we've certainly encouraged firms to consider using Caseware IDEA audit data analytic tool. There is a discount provided to currently to firm members versus the market rate. And we have relationships and partnerships with Caseware in other platforms as well. So that's been something that's been quite successful. We have seen a little bit of in-house activity as well. Some firms have gone off and recruited an individual who has a particular specialism in data. And therefore they're perhaps doing a little bit more in-house than some of our other member firms are. But we're not really seeing use of a wide range of different developers, and we're certainly not seeing many firms yet go off and recruit somebody specific for a data role within the firm. Where I think a lot of our firms will move to going forward is that I do think that we will see more firms making use of call it a partnership, or certainly some form of engagement with an external service provider that can help with the accessing, the extraction, the cleanup process, and that can provide a good range of different routines that will be very relevant to the audit process. And I think, I mean, you mentioned that you're getting a lot of inquiries and levels of interest from developers that approach PKF International, and I suspect what you're seeing, is certainly something I see in the market, is that firms are just getting better at knowing what an audit network needs in terms of the level of support. They don't just provide the software anymore, or they don't just provide a tool and then run away and disappear into the distance. They are getting much better at offering a good level of support and training to firms, which just makes it easier to get running with the actual procedures. In terms of in-house, a lot of firms do sort of theoretically talk about, look, should we be employing, or should we be finding a data scientist to bring in? And I think the answer can really sort of depend on the size of the firm, the volume of data analytic routines that you think you as a firm will be running. I think there are downsides to it, though. I think that you've got to remember that if a large part of the business is audit, at the end of the day, whoever you're bringing in really has to be somebody who can work with audit teams, who understands what the audit process is, and vice versa. The audit team can work with a data scientist, and sometimes those responsibilities and roles can break down if they're not really sort of managed properly. Whereas some of the activities that a data scientist can do really could also be done by an external service provider as well, and that way you've got a bit more flexibility over how you engage with them, the sort of level of commitment you have with them, and depending on the firm you're working with, or the external provider you're working with, you can really develop quite a strong collaborative relationship that can help move things forward. And another thing that I'm seeing from external providers is that they do tend to be using audit networks as part of their R&D department now as well, and they realize that the feedback that they get from audit firms is really valuable in terms of developing and improving their tools, and a good external developer will, I think, be quite keen to work with firms now, and very much in that capacity as well. So yeah, I think again, a range of different answers to this one, but we do talk about this in the data framework. There's a chapter sort of devoted in that, and there isn't one answer to this, but certainly the ADA framework sort of sets out a number of things to consider when you're looking to partner up or find an external service provider, and I think if you go through that sort of checklist of areas to consider and what's right for your firm, I think that will set our firms up quite well to have the right kind of relationships.
Yeah, it's an important part of the process. To get that relationship right is really important.
Yeah, I think so, and I think when we've, as a profession, when we've worked with external providers of sort of IT solutions, I think it's safe to say that the level of support we've had has been fairly minimal. I mean, we've tended to use IT solutions for such as Microsoft Word and Office, Excel, and we've had audit platforms, but I think with the proliferation of data and digital technologies, we're in a different world now, and things have really moved on. So, and even going back 5-6 years ago, I think the sort of earlier developments of AD tools didn't have the same levels of support alongside the product that they do now. So I think it's a really good opportunity these days for firms on this one to take the time to identify the external provider that will give them the best support. And there's different firms out there with different specialities and different strengths, so there's quite a lot to choose from. Yeah.
Indeed, great. Okay. So The impression I get when I think about the benefits of using ADAs in the audit is, I guess, that they might help save time and reduce the team's workload. Are you getting the sense that audit clients are asking for a reduction in audit fees because of this?
Well, that's a very good question, AJ. It sounds like you're maybe an auditor in waiting yourself. Yeah, look, no, I think it's a very, very relevant point. Absolutely, and realistically, yes, I think we're going to get those sort of inquiries and comments coming through from clients. But I think above all else, I think it's just very important to be speaking with clients before using ADAs to a significant level on engagements, and talk with them about your plans to be using audit data analytics, and explain to them what might be different, what might change. I think there's a number of reasons. Yes, you may need to be ready to respond to the question around, well, what does that mean for our fees? But I think more importantly, really got to be aware of using the right client who's got the systems that could actually allow for audit data analytics to be run effectively and efficiently, versus a client that's maybe got a weaker control framework that just wouldn't be the best place to start using ADAs. And in terms of costs, in all likelihood, there will be clients around the world that will ask about that. But the other thing I think to think about in terms of discussion points with clients is around, there is a lot of change coming through from developing auditing standards, new auditing standards, revised auditing standards that will be quite demanding on firms. So things like the audit requirements around auditing estimates, audit requirements around risk assessment, and all of the firm level quality control requirements as well will change too. Group auditing standard will go through quite a significant revision over the next couple of years as well. So within the next 3 years, I think the landscape is going to become a lot tougher for firms, and there'll be a lot more new requirements coming in on how audits are executed, and there's a cost to that as well. So to the extent that there might be some element of time saving and efficiency from using ADA procedures to good effect, there's also going to be this downside around the pressure on audit teams caused by these new requirements. I think all of which are very good and all of which make sense, but realistically there's a lot more work to do and a lot more work to document as well. So this, it's pluses and minuses there. But my advice would be to not to shy away from that discussion, but tackle that up front with clients and explain to them the benefits that you're aiming to get, not just for audit quality, but in terms of the insights that ADAs can bring on a client's information, and how you would hope to sort of share that and make that available to back to client management after the audit. And I think if you're focusing on the value that's coming through from the procedures, you quickly move away from the cost side of things in any case. But whatever you do, it's worth tackling that up front rather than waiting until the end of the audit.
Definitely. And do you think the client has a big part to play in this process?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I think, and this is particularly for firms that are maybe starting out using audit data analytics where they haven't really used them so much before. I think it's very important to identify those firms that are going to be supportive of what the audit firm is trying to do. Find those clients that will kind of want to work, that maybe understand the benefits and what the auditor is trying to do. And I think most businesses these days are seeing the change coming through in terms of data and digitalization of their processes. And I think along with that, I would expect that the management really want to be getting a clearer picture of of financial reporting systems and the information that's in there and the processes and controls. And my view is that data analytics gives the auditor a much bigger opportunity to get a more widespread, comprehensive picture and all of that. And that there's got to be value in that to be fed back to the client. So those clients that really do have strong relationships with their audit firms, I think they've got a lot to gain out of this as well. And where you're approaching the whole process of transforming the audit from an older sample-based manual sort of approach to a data analytic approach, I think it can be quite collaborative in how you get there, and it can make the end result more likely to be successful, where you're having a sort of almost a sort of partnership kind of perspective on things with the client. So yeah, very much so. I do think clients have got a huge part to play. One other thing I'd add to that as well is that I do get some firms, audit firms, will often sort of explain that one reason that they're not using audit data analytics is because their clients are quite manual in nature and don't have systems, digital systems, they're not in the cloud, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're just not very modern and advanced with their IT systems. Therefore, ADAs would not really be a game changer for the audit. And I've got to assume that that's a fair statement for a firm based on its clients as of today.
Yeah.
But what I'd say is that I would be surprised if most of that firm's same clients haven't gone through some sort of transformation process themselves in terms of the digitalization of their financial reporting systems over the next few years. And so I think it's important to speak to clients about where they're going, what investments they're making, what changes they're making, because it's becoming much easier now for businesses to get cloud-based solutions and to make an upgrade in their accounting processes. And it can be very quick before you know it, as an audit firm, you're left behind if suddenly overnight your client base changes and your approaches and techniques are old hat. So yeah, I think clients are central to the success of this going forward. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. The ADA clearly covers various aspects of data analytics, but does it also make reference to the use of other new technologies within the audit? For example, robotic process automation or machine learning?
We haven't. I think one of the reasons for that is just simply that right here, right now, the ADA tools are available. They're proven. They're working at other firms. The technology is there to use. So we really wanted a starting point with this, and that we felt was the most appropriate place to start. In terms of using other technologies, robotic process automation, machine learning, there's a lot going on there. There's sort of automated visualization tools as well, and scanning tools that use AI to some extent. We're not yet seeing such a big uptake throughout the rest of the profession in those other technologies as of yet. But we are seeing a lot of investment and development from software firms and developers. So yes, robotic process automation is coming on, and we're seeing good projects to develop automation of things like bank confirmations procedures, debtors confirmations, using bots to do that sort of thing. So it's not going to be long before that really becomes much more widely available, and therefore I think within a pretty short time frame, the ADA framework will become perhaps more of an automated audit technologies framework, if you like. But we're probably a year so away from expanding it in that regard.
Okay, great, thank you. A bit of an out there question, but can I ask about blockchain?
Yes, you can. So blockchain. So again, similar with RPA and machine learning, the ADA framework doesn't include reference to blockchain. I think one of the differences with blockchain is, it's another technology that we hear a lot about, but perhaps in terms of how it's going to impact audit, it's more so that it's something that we will have to be ready to audit rather than being a technology that can be used as a tool for auditing. So as we see more of our clients and more businesses using blockchain systems and processes for their contracts, for their orders, for their inventory control, we will need to be increasingly standing ready to audit blockchain. You do hear a lot of talk around how blockchain will eradicate the need for an audit. I don't really share that same perspective. For me, I think it's certainly going to be a different way to for the auditors out there listening to this, there'll be a different way to audit existence of a transaction, or it'll be another way to think about the confirmation process for an audit. But really, in terms of a set of financial statements, and in terms of how financial statements are currently produced, there's a whole load more goes into the process of preparing a set of financial statements that would go above and beyond what blockchain can. We understand what it can do in the future. So areas like that require a lot of judgment and provisions and complex accounting, presentation disclosures, all of those areas are not really going to be changed by the use of blockchain, and will still need to be audited. And even for those areas of the audit which do use blockchain, the change for the auditor is that, there's maybe a more straightforward way of auditing a confirmation, or a more straightforward way of auditing a transaction, but it will become more important that we understand the technology behind the blockchain, that we understand the controls over the blockchain, who has access to it, and change control, et cetera, which would need to be something that's very central to the audit process. So one way or another, I think we will see changes. And again, look, once blockchain is much more day-to-day part of our routine audits, we would look to be issuing some guidance on it then, but perhaps maybe 2 or 3 years before we're quite there for that one.
Thank you. Where are our competitors with this? What are we seeing from the profession generally in terms of using data analytics in the audit?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think we sometimes beat ourselves up a little bit that we assume that other firms are racing ahead with data analytics. In my view, I don't think they are quite yet. I think we see quite a lot of misleading information in proposals and other promotional materials from other networks around their use of data analytics, and even the use of AI, which, when a firm says they're using AI, more often than not, it means that they're just using some form of audit data analytics and not really advanced AI. But the feedback we're getting from business, and certainly this was my observation as well before I joined PKF a couple of years ago, was that there hasn't really been widespread uptake in the use of audit data analytics across the profession. Probably a little bit more advanced in the Big Four, but even there in the Big Four, what I would say is that there's a comfort zone developing for use of ADAs, and that comfort zone really is using audit data analytics to audit journal entries, perhaps to audit revenue transactions, to look at anomalies, outliers for revenue transactions. But I don't think it's fundamentally changed the way that audits have been run yet across any of our competitors. But I think within a couple of years, I do think that we will see much more widespread use. So I think the risk for a network like PKF is that it's not going to be long before we are left behind. But I don't think we need to be too worried that we're really far behind the competition at the moment. I don't think we are. I don't get the sense of that from our clients and businesses that we speak to. I have also been speaking about the same point to the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, and they have been a little bit concerned as well that the profession hasn't quite yet made the progress that we thought we'd be seeing in data analytics quite yet. Some of the initiatives that they're looking at to respond to that point is, for example, they are creating a Audit Data Analytics course as part of the curriculum for new students doing their chartered accountancy. So I think next year that should be available to, well, that will be part of the curriculum. So new chartered accountants will be studying that and tested on that in England and Wales, and the Scottish Institute is not far behind as well in developing a course on use of data analytics as well. So I think in 5 years' time, our managers of the future, our new managers are going to have been trained in how to use data analytics. The technologies will move on again. Developers will move on as well in terms of what they offer. And fingers crossed, the standard setters and the regulators will be a bit clearer on their views on use of ADA within the audit approach as well. So I think all of this sort of comes back to why we're issuing the framework now, because if we wait for very much longer, the risk is very much that we will be left behind as the profession moves forward. So yeah, just in terms of the question, no, I don't think we're too far behind the competition at the moment, but we got to really start investing and taking this seriously, because it won't really be long before we are.
The ADA framework, I mean, it sounds great, but what difference is it actually going to make? Are we going to see changes in the way our firms do things as a result of it?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think the framework is just a document, and I think there's a lot that we should be doing as a network, sharing our success stories, helping each other in terms of the methodologies that we're using, and so when we have our regional meetings, when we have our international assurance meetings, these are great opportunities for firms to get together to have those kind of discussions on those points. And I think it's by sharing best practice and sharing what's not working as well. That's really what's going to make the difference for our firms to move on. And I think we've spoken a lot about developers as well, and I think what we can do through PKF International is really be helping our firms to gain a level of understanding as to which developers are best for their circumstances as well, and who they should be thinking of partnering up with to kind of get the level of support that they need. So the framework is very, very much, I think, step one in this. But there's going to be a lot more to do to embed this, and a lot more practical steps that we should be taking with our firms to get it up and running.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that firms have got access to the framework, where do they start? This is the sort of initial state. Where do they actually start?
Yeah. Well, the ADA itself is such a basic document. It starts off at a very basic level. So I would, it sounds obvious, but I would definitely recommend reading the ADA framework. Yeah. I think from there, there are some very practical steps in terms of how to successfully implement ADAs. I think it's about being quite honest as to what it is that you can use ADAs for within your audit clients. And that answer will be very different from firm to firm. We'll have a number of firms that maybe have bigger listed clients or clients that are in financial services with more complex financial reporting systems versus firms that maybe are dealing with smaller, medium-sized businesses that have more basic systems. And in terms of how you deploy ADAs within audits at those different ends of the scale, it will really be very, very different. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach to entering into ADAs, and that time upfront, before you make the investment decisions, before you go too far down the lines of saying, well, what do we really need? I think that's really worthwhile time. And from there on, I think once start scoping out in terms of what your current client base is, what systems they use, what would make sense in terms of changing your audit approach to make more use of ADA technologies specific and tailored for your clients. I think the next thing then is really just to be patient. Just don't assume that things are going to change overnight. Don't beat teams up in terms of dropping in recovery against budgets and engagements. Give teams the scope to play around a little bit to a certain extent with ADAs, to make mistakes, but to learn from those mistakes as well. And it could take 2 or 3 audit cycles before teams and firms are really comfortable with how they're deploying ADAs and how they're documenting the results of that. But that need just to be patient and sort of encourage creative thinking and innovation in terms of how do we deploy this tool within our audit. We're not going to just use it to do exactly what we're doing before in our old approach, but to do it using an ADA tool rather than an Excel spreadsheet. I think you've got to build in an element of creativity, understand what the tools can do, understand what's involved in the audit, and kind of bring the best of those together. So patience, creativity are very important sort of cultural shifts that firms need to think about in order to be successful. And as I say, talk about it as well. I mean, I think we will be trying to build in as much capacity and space at our regional and international meetings for firms to get together to talk about this too. But I think it can really help to speak about experiences that other firms are having in different parts of the world, as well as you sort of develop your confidence in this.
Thank you. I think that's some really good advice there. Okay, well, thank you, Jamie. Really appreciate you talking to me today. I mean, it sounds like there's some real opportunities for us out there, and hopefully the ADA framework will do its thing. And I really look forward to seeing how firms can adopt it and hearing about those success stories. Yeah, me too. And as I say, I think hopefully within a couple of years' time, we'll be much more standardized in terms of how we're using ADAs, and much more increasingly so we're turning our attention towards those other new technologies and also using data analytics and to drive other parts of the business as well. So it's all very exciting. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, AJ.